Probably one of the biggest things for me that has helped my river fishing, and when you look back at the course of my career, I mean, I've got, I can almost point a finger at 3 tournament events. The Arkansas River, the first tournament win I ever had in my career was, it was a full-blown, river type scenario. I win I guess it would be my second major win was in 2004, the year before the Elite Series started, on the Alabama River. It's kind of that break, when I told you I had 7 years between wins. The first one was on a river, and my second win was on a river. So I really feel like I kind of got a grasp of how to fish a river when it's somewhat right. But the big key for me in that scenario is my childhood years. Growing up, I didn't have the ability, we grew up pretty dirt poor, I'm going to just be honest. We didn't have boats and motors, and we did a lot of bank fishing. I trout fished a ton, and I creek fished, for white bass in the spring. Occasionally we'd catch some spotted bass or largemouth in the creeks where I grew up fishing. But spending as much time as I did wading around in those creeks, watching trout on the rivers, especially after I did get a boat, it really has opened my eyes up to how many things people miss about rivers. One of the biggest things in my mind, when you can visibly watch fish in a clear water, current environment, it will blow your mind where and how these fish will position. So when I go to a dirty water river, I can visualize what I grew up watching in clear water, where a lot of guys can't visualize that. They've never had that experience of fishing those clear water tail races and things of that nature. The biggest thing I want to talk about is current breaks, current seams, before I really get into the depth of this deal. A lot of people, when they envision a current break, it's always behind an object, behind a log, behind a rock, at the tail of an island, at the tail of a bend, a rock that protrudes off of the bank. But what you have to fathom is there is as big a current break at the head of almost every object as there is at the tail. I have watched trout, when that current is ripping, set in front of a rock, just as motionless as the next 3 or 4 trout are sitting behind the rock. The thing that I've found is it typically seems like a bigger fish is the one that always sets up at the head. I don't know why it is, but through my years of watching trout, watching white bass, it's always like the bigger ones are the ones that take advantage, and it's almost like they're guarding that area. As soon as you catch that fish, generally another one takes his place. And that's what's cool about being able to witness this stuff in clear water. You drift by a rock and you catch one fish off of it, and there was only one there. You come back up and drift it again, there's another one that's taking its place. So that ability to be able to understand the current breaks is huge. There's, even at the head of an island, that it looks like, current's just ripping down and just hitting that island and splitting, you'd swear that it's just hitting, all sides of it. There is a place right at the head, and it will vary based on the depth and things like that, but there is a place in front of that island where there's a push of water where fish can just sit almost motionless. So when you're fishing river systems, you really have got to pay attention to more than just the current breaks behind objects. Is everybody kind of gathering this, or are you kind of thinking I'm talking nonsense here? Because it's unbelievable. Yeah, when you're watching fish in clear water. Has anybody else witnessed this? Is there anybody in here that witnessed what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's a good example. The Detroit River, these clear water bodies you go to, when you can, and a lot of times when you fish rivers, some of the best practice you can have is just drifting and watching, especially if you're fishing for fish that are shallow enough to be visible. And it is a huge deal. So let's move on to the next slide. When you get into the springtime of the year, and we're going to end this show with winter, but one thing about rivers, for the most part, I'm going to say, in my mind, 80% of the fish that live in a river system that flows constantly year-round will get out of the current to winter. So when spring hits, most of these fish are in the backwater areas. They're in current break areas, and it may not always be off the river in a backwater. It may just be a big bend in the river that has, you know, a big eddy created somewhere that makes a section of that river current dead. But that's one of the biggest things in the spring is you want to be close or adjacent to those wintering areas because those fish are going to show up quick. And, you know, the biggest thing that you want to focus.
Welcome to Bass University TV, an online video training course where you'll learn champion bass fishing techniques from pro anglers Pete Gluzek, Mike Iaconelli, and their talented special guests. From on the water to in the classroom, you'll learn sound techniques and strong fundamental bass fishing skills. Watch hours of video content on multiple topics at your own pace for a low monthly fee. Cancel at any time. Information is power in the sport of fishing, so learn from the very best. Subscribe to Bass University TV today.